The movie opens up with a fight scene in a prison where a gang of prisoners is trying to subdue Isaiah Bone, who is in the prison. Being former Marine and highly skilled martial artist, he beats them all up and leaves them all wounded. Then the scene shifts to where has been released from the prison and relocates to Los Angeles, a city notorious for its underground fighting circuit. He hires a room at the house of a single woman named Tamara who lives with her kids and is very strict about the rules of living in the house. Here we are introduced to James, a local mob leader who comes to an underground fighting competition with his girlfriend Angela and his fighter Hammerman, who fights with a local fighter named Cowboy and beats him within a few minutes. This pisses off Pinball, a local fight promoter, and he rushes to his car after paying up James. In the car, Bone meets Pinball and asks him to set him up for a fight. Reluctantly, Pinball gets him his first fight, which he wins with a couple of moves. On his way home, Bone asks him about the James girlfriend, who tells him that she was married to a guy named Danny, whom James set up on a topples homicide, send him to jail, and when James learned that she was pregnant, he had her undergo an abortion, and since then she has fallen into drug addiction. Next day, Bone goes to the fighting arena once again and fights with the fighters of another local fight promoter named Tat. He takes up a bet for $5,000 with best fighter of Tat, which Bone wins with just a single punch. Tat doubles the bet for Bone fighting 2 fighters at a time, and Bone wins that one as well. Then the bet is doubled up again for fighting with 3 fighters, and Bone wins that one as well, making the bet amount $20,000. Tat doesn't want to pay, but Bone beats up all his fighters and takes money from him. Bone returns home wounded, where Tamara sees him and puts a bandage over his wound. Bone starts to develop a bond with Tamara, the kids living with her, and an elderly Latin American man named Roberto whom he plays chess with. He develops a special bond with one of the kids named Jared, adopted by Tamara after his father's imprisonment. Over the following nights, Bone builds a reputation for himself in the underground fighting world, triumphing over every adversary and amassing substantial wealth for both himself and Pinball. Finally, Bone was able to get a fight with James' fighter Hammerman. Bone defeats Hammerman badly within a few minutes, and after the fight, James invites both Bone and Pinball to his place for celebration, which Bone accepts despite a reluctance from Pinball. Once both Bone and Pinball reach James' house, he greets them and takes Bone to his private practice room, where he tells him that he actually is a very fine person and loves a clean life. There James tells him why he invited him to his place. He tells him that he actually works for a guy named Franklin McVeigh, who is a black market arms dealer from London, England, and is part of a group of influential people from around the world known as the Consortium. This consortium is running international underground fights throughout the world. The current champion of these fights is a guy named Pretty Boy Price, who is a vicious fighter and so far has killed 2 guys in the ring. James tells Bone that he has the potential to beat Pretty Boy Price, so he proposes to Bone to take part in this competition. He also tells him that getting a fight with Price will cost $5 million, but he is willing to pay that price if Bone decides to fight with him. Bone tells him that he will think about it, which clarifies to James that he is not willing to fight. James, who wants him to take part in this competition at every cost, calls Angela and asks her to convince Bone to take part in this fight by being intimate with him and threatens to kill her if she doesn't comply with his demand. Unwillingly, Angela takes Bone to a private room, but after reaching the room, he pulls out a gun at him. Bone tells her that he is a friend of Danny from the prison and he is here to save her from the clutches of James, and he also knows where her son is. After finding this out, Angela is ready to get out of this mess where she was trapped by James to save her son. They both come out of the room as if Angela has done the job of convincing Bone to fight Price. James asks Bone again if he is ready to fight, and Bone gives an ambiguous answer, giving an impression to James as if he is ready. Bone also asks James to let Angela be with him for a few days, which James accepts reluctantly. Bone takes Angela with him, but admits her in a rehabilitation center anonymously to get her cleaned up before meeting her son. On his way back home, Bone finds out that Roberto has been killed by James. He rushes home to console Tamara, who is crying. He consoles her and they both get intimate. The next day, James meets Franklin in his mansion and asks him to talk to the consortium to get him a fight with Price with his fighter. Franklin and James have a harsh arguments over the matter for a while, but ultimately Franklin agrees to talk to the consortium, but also threatens James that life will get really ugly for him if he let him down in front of the consortium. The next day, James reaches the house of Bone where he finds Bone in bed with Tamara and tells him that he gave her his girl and he is lying in bed with a nanny. James then tells him that he has convinced Franklin for a fight between Bone and Pretty Boy Price, so he should get ready, but Bone tells him that he never agreed to fight with Price. Bone also confronts James about the killings of Danny and Roberto, and James finds out the real purpose of Bone. This pisses off James and he attacks Bone with his sword, but Bone subdues him easily. After that, James pulls out a gun on Tamara and threatens to kill her and Danny's son if Bone doesn't agree to fight and flees. After reaching his place, James asks him men to get ready with weapons and sends a group to bring Bone and the other to bring Angela back from the rehabilitation center. The first group confronts Pinball and asks him about Bone, but in the meantime, Bone reaches there and gunfight ensues between him and the group. Bone kills them all. The other group reaches the rehabilitation center but find Pinball and Bone there instead of Angela. Bone kills them all as well and talks to James over the phone and tell him that he is coming for him. Once Bone reaches McVeigh's mansion, he finds the whole consortium there waiting for him. James insists that Bone must win back his money by fighting Price, or else he will harm Angela, Tamara, Jared, and Pinball. During their conversation, Bone secretly records James' confession about his role in Danny's setup and murder using the GPS phone. This evidence is transmitted to Pinball's phone, who subsequently forwards it to the police. Pinball also calls police to inform them about a possible homicide and gives the mansion's address to them. Bone is still not willing to fight, but in the meantime, Price comes there and challenges Bone for a fight. Bone and Price have a fight where initially Price seems to be winning the fight, but soon Bone brings him to his knees. Although Bone subdues Price, decides to forfeit the fight just as victory seems imminent. Enraged, James attacks Bone with a katana, but Bone receives assistance when McVeigh's bodyguard provides him with a Jan. Bone opts to use the sheath of the sword to overpower James, ultimately causing James to sever his own hand in the ensuing struggle. He escapes before the police arrive to apprehend James. James tells Franklin that if he goes down, Franklin will also go down, upon which Franklin replies, "We will see." The next day, Angela is joyously reunited with Jared. Despite initial tension, Tamara, who had contemplated evicting Bone due to his association with James, offers him a place to stay, but Bone declines, fearing he will bring more trouble. Bone leaves an envelope filled with money for Tamara and asks her to take care of Angela once she has recovered. Angela thanks Bone for helping her out and getting her son back to her before Bone leaves. He also parts ways with Pinball, explaining that he has unfinished business to attend to. During the end credits, McVeigh dispatches JC and his gang to seek retribution against James in the prison showers, where James faces a brutal assault.